In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to make a block. Yeah, I am holding a block. It should be the color of the sky. It's very almost hard to see because I made it the color of the sky. Another thing I forgot is transparent blocks can actually be seen through water textures, which is a crazy bug to have, but that's really cool. Anyways, I'm going to be showing you how to make a block so that when you collide with it, it's just going to do a thing. And the thing is going to teleport you in the sky, and it's going to summon lightning. Practical use for that? Well, I guess you'll have to find out at the end. But for now, we're going to be talking about the onEntityCollision method. So, let's get cracking. Alright, and to get started with this video, we are going to copy the air block, and we're going to paste it in here. And I'm going to call this, because I feel like it, we're going to call this the high block, and then we're going to call this the high block. And then just as always, we are going to make a new Java class, and we're going to be calling this the high block, basically whatever it is that we're doing. And just like always, we're going to extends block and then make a constructor matching super. The method that we're going to be using today is going to be onEntityCollision. And there are many things. If you have access to the world, you have basically access to everything. That's how I see it in my mind, because the world can basically call everything. But also having direct access to the entity is also pretty useful. A misconception that we commonly have when we talk about onEntityCollision on top of a block is basically that a lot of people will look at this and they'll say, onEntityCollision. So this is basically when I'm touching the block with, when I'm colliding with the block. And that is not true. It's not colliding with or against the block. It's basically saying the thing should be basically like entity is in block. Not touching, like not touching the sides. They're supposed to be you. So this is just a big thing about this, and this is just a common misconception. So a good thing to think about it is like if you're touching a cobweb block, right? A cobweb slows you down, water slows you down, but it's not when you're next to it. It's not when you're like on the side, Your hitbox has to actually be inside of it, and the way that you can easily be inside of it is because, well, all those blocks have non-collidable, making it allowing you to be able to collide with the block. And this is just something that I generally like to do is you gotta know what you're doing, and normally when I come up with an idea, I like to have at least 3 main things that make it unique, and then I try and put them together. So, the first thing, let's make a block disappear on collision. This one's really simple. World.setBlockState, and then position just means the position of the block, and then we're going to have to put in a state. So let's put in blocks.air.getDefaultState, and this will simply do the first one. Block will disappear on collision. The second thing is to teleport the block will teleport the player to the sky limit. So that one should also be easy. So we can say entity.teleport, and then we can say position.getX, and then we can say 319, and then position.getZ. And then this will teleport the entity to the sky limit. And then we are specifying at sky limit, so this is a parameter, and when we are separating something like that, we're going to have to do an if statement. And so we can say if, and then we can say position is greater than equal to 319 dot get y. The elevation is equal to this, right? And then we want basically this part right here. So we're gonna strike. Actually, we don't have to say 2. Just strike player with lightning. So we have that one settled out. And if the player is not being struck by lightning because we only literally have everything else, we can actually just write else, and then we can just literally shove everything else in here. So the idea is, if the player, so if I was to read this now, if the player is already at build height limit, there is no reason to teleport the player. So we're not going to write it in here. But if the player is not at build height limit, well then, get him there. And so the other thing that we said is we want to teleport the block with the player. That way we can also do the striking of the lightning. So to do that, we're going to need to do that with this Control-C, Control-V. And then this should be our ideas. And so they're nicely typed out. So between these two things, we're going to do let's do this one first. And this is where things are going to kind of get, if you're not good with switching up variables, this might sound a little confusing. So the first thing I'm going to do to just kind of try and have you keep up with what I'm doing is I'm literally going to take a little handy-dandy calculator. And the idea is three things. Well, first, if I try and set the block, right? So obviously this is a set world.setBlockState, and then we have a position that we would like it to be, which we would want the y position to be 319, and then our block state is going to be this dot get default block state, and that is what we're focusing on. So for the position, there is only one position that I'm allowed. So I can't say get x, get y, get z. What I can do is say go up, and then I can say, bring it up 1, bring it up 2, bring it up 6. The problem here is that let's say I'm at two positions, and I'm at -30, or I use this at 60, 65, right? And so if I'm at -30 and I say 65, and I say I want you to put the position up 10 blocks, then in the result, what's going to happen is, well, this is going to become -20, and the other result would be I would then be at 75, where it would just add 10 blocks to both of these. But I need to make some sort of formula where that no matter what coordinate I'm at, it will always equal 319. That is basically what I want. I want it to always equal 319. And that is when we get into the two variables. So we're going to need an int x and an int y. So to just try and keep up with everything that we're doing, that's why we have our handy-dandy calculator. And the first thing that we're going to have to do is, well, let's say 319, which is the number we want, and we're going to subtract this from our position.getY. So in each one, we're going to try and keep up with this. So in the original example, I said -30 and 65. So let's take out our calculator and say 319 minus -30, which is actually plus 30, is equal to, what did it say, 349? Yeah, 349. 349. And the other answer would be, let's say if I was at 65 and I subtract the 319. So if I have 319 minus 65 is going to equal 254. 254. So that is the first part of the thing. So now I want basically y to equal 319 no matter what. And to do that, I need to basically switch these over. I just need to make these things switch over. So the first thing that I need to do is basically say x plus position.getY. And that is going to switch these two variables over. And so that'll make it very helpful. So now, this was what x was. So if I was to now do the opposite here, where I say get the position, and the position was at -30. So -30 plus 349 is basically 319. And then if I have 65 plus 254, should also equal 319. How am I going to put that inside of here? Y minus position.getY. Let's try and do it again. So basically we have, well, 319, 319. So if I take 319, right? Actually, let's try and type out what's going on here. So in one formula, it is basically going to be 30 plus, and then it's going to be whatever y is, which we know y is going to be 319, and then we're going to say minus the position of the get y, which is basically minus 30. So minus 30, which for this example would look like this, while the other one would be basically 65 plus, and then this would be 319 minus 65. And what you'll notice is we're just literally, we're subtracting 65, and that's going to make our number. And then we're left with, now that we've subtracted 65, let's add it again. So you'll be left at 319. And the same thing happens with here. We are going to subtract 30, and then we are going to add that negative 30. So you should always be left with 319, no matter what. All right, so that's the math. Did you understand it? I sure hope so. Don't feel bad if you don't understand it. I tried to explain it the best that I can. There are probably people who can explain it better than me. But you either get it or you don't. If you don't get it, don't feel bad. You'll probably get it with experience and then using the mathematics. Like, the more you use it, the easier it'll get. But basically, we have the teleport block to the player, which is basically with the build height. So this part is all done. The last thing that we're going to need to do is strike the player with lightning. It's not that this is the goal, right? But what are we actually going to be doing? What we're going to be doing is actually summon lightning to build height limit when player collides with block at height height limit. So this has a lot more words, but it is actually simpler. The way we can do this is world dot. Is it summon? No. Spawn entity? There it is. Spawn entity. Scratch that. Scratch that. Scratch that. It's actually entity type dot, and then we can put in lightning bolt dot spawn, and then we're going to need to call for the world, and then it says it needs a position, which will be that current position because it'll only happen when we are at the build height limit, so it's perfectly fine. And then we need what's called a spawn reason. So if we just type in spawn reason, we can see all of the, let's do spawn reason dot, and then here we can see breeding bucket, spawn egg. There is a bunch of things that we triggered. I'm gonna say mob summons. And then it says that we have this error here. So although it's called world, it wants to cast the first argument to server world. Now, there's a very important thing. If you ever have the server world, you gotta do this. Because you just gotta do this. Actually, I'm gonna do it the safe way. The safer, the better. If world dot is client, and then say is not client, meaning the server side, and then just shove everything inside of here. This is good practice, because if ever for a moment, a second, a tick, it ever thinks that whatever you're doing is supposed to be on the server, and the server somehow, it just isn't on the server, it's gonna crash. And to stop it from crashing, let this only work if it is on the server. Don't let the client try and do it for the server, and that's all you gotta do. If you ever do something that requires the server world, always just say the world is not the client, making it server side, and bam. It will now forcefully override everything within there. With that in mind, this should have all three of our entities, all three of our things on there. Because when the position of the block is at 319, it will summon lightning when the player collides with it, because that's what onEntityCollision does. if the player is not at 319, so everything else will follow. It'll take the positions and will basically set the world state, so it'll set the block. If I collide with the block and I am not at build height limit, it's going to set the block to height limit, and it's going to teleport me also to height limit with it. And then since I'm automatically going to be teleported with the block, I will then be colliding with the block at 319. It will then summon the lightning bolt, but then because I collided with the block on the ground, when I collide with the block on the ground and it's running this, it will get rid of that block with the world the air. And then when I do it again after it gets summoned, after it gets teleported to 319, and I touch it, it will summon the lightning, but it will also, once again, do air. So everything should be all explained. I'm actually going to keep that up there because it is a very good thing to look at. And so now we can put in our high block, and this block should generally be good. There is, just because I added something to the texture, I didn't put any holes in the texture. Let's take a look what the texture is. So if we look at GIMP, 47.1, 65.5, 100, this is the color I'm going to be using. So if I say I have a 16 by 16, and then I just simply fill this in, normally if I have the opacity at 100 and I fill it in, it's going to look like that. But if I Control A delete, set this, you could set this to 50. If 50, you can see how it's getting lighter. And then I'm going to Control A delete. And then we can say, I'm going to say 10 though. At 10, fill it in. And you can tell that it got slightly blue. And then you can file export as, and then you can save it with your picture. And in your pictures, and you can do that. I've already have it inside of my pictures or my textures, the high block, so it does look like this. You can tell it has very slight color to it. But one thing that you're going to have to remember on top of that is, well, you want to put it in our client, so we can Control D, and we're going to put this as high block, and instead of get cut out, because there's no holes in it, that's what get cut out is for, we want to call something called get translucent. Now, if you decided that you don't want to make this block translucent, this whole part that I'm talking about is completely unnecessary, but that is just something on top, and I wanted to explain it because I've never talked about it before on the, well, not on the channel, but in this specific series for the 1.20 series, so I would like to mention that. Beyond that, as long as it is in your item group and you've got all your block state, lang, model, texture, then you are all good to go. For whatever reason, you cannot summon things with the .air. You can't use /fill. I'm not too sure why, but I can't do that. So if something has .air, it does not need the .replaceable either, but it does need not collision. That way you can get inside the block, and it does, because of the way I have the texture, it does need the not opaque so it can be translucent or transparent. And that's perfectly fine. So now, if I was to start the world, it should now work perfectly fine. So it turns out we spent all this time making this block, and what is a single practical use that I have for it? I have no idea. So I'm going to pretend like there's a good one. So I'm going to have my handy-dandy elytra on, and I'm going to summon a warden. And now that the warden is going to summon, the best example that I have, he's coming in. I'm just going to place this block on the ground, and I'm just going to GTFO. So I'm going to use, I'm just start flying. Hopefully I'm not flying straight in the ground. That'd be funny. And then my darkness wears off. But there we go. I have now escaped the warden. Simple as that. You know, a downside is you get struck by lightning, but hey, it doesn't matter how deep you are in the caves, you can escape. If you think that's a pretty good use for it, I mean, if you got a better use for it, you know, let me know. If you got a better idea for a block, DM me, let me know, and I totally won't take the idea. But that's gonna wrap up for this video. So thank you guys so much for watching, and without further ado,